One of these you pay for. The other one is sitting in a drawer in your kitchen. Only one of them still works after 3 years in the soil. If you have ever mixed your own potting soil or tried to loosen up heavy clay, you have likely reached for a bag of perlite. Those little white, weightless rocks are universally recommended for creating air pockets and improving drainage. You mix them in, and for the first few months, the soil feels light and airy. But fast forward a couple of seasons, and the soil is dense again. The white rocks seem to have vanished, or they have turned into a fine, useless dust. You were led to believe perlite was a permanent structural fix. Meanwhile, you have been throwing away natural wine corks. You were about to throw this away because you thought it was just garbage. But when you examine the physical structure of a natural cork and compare it directly to perlite, the physics dictate a clear winner for long-term soil structure. The physics here is settled. The durability of an amendment in a compressive soil environment is determined by its cellular architecture. Perlite is an open-pore, expanded volcanic glass. It is brittle. Natural cork is a closed-cell, elastic biological matrix. It compresses and rebounds. When you incorporate perlite into a soil matrix, it creates immediate macro pores. However, every time you water the soil, every time the soil freezes and thaws, and every time you walk nearby, compressive forces are applied. Because perlite is essentially a rigid glass bubble, it cannot absorb that compression. It shatters. Once it shatters, it loses its porosity. It becomes dust, and the soil compacts around it. Cork operates on a fundamentally different mechanical principle. It is made of millions of tiny, sealed, air-filled cells. It is nature's shock absorber. Use only natural cork. Synthetic wine stoppers are plastic and won't break down. You must identify the real thing. Natural cork has a visible, organic grain. Let us look closer at the cellular level of cork to understand why it outperforms commercial alternatives so drastically. Why does cork resist degradation while perlite crumbles? Natural cork, harvested from the bark of the cork oak tree, consists of a honeycomb-like structure of suberin cells. Suberin is a complex, waxy substance that is highly resistant to moisture, chemical breakdown, and microbial decay. The cells within the cork are strictly closed. Water does not easily penetrate the interior of the individual cells. Instead, water is trapped in the interstitial spaces between the chopped pieces of cork when you mix them into the soil. This closed cell structure is exactly why cork floats. The air is securely trapped within millions of microscopic, watertight compartments. When a natural wine cork is exposed to the aggressive moisture and microbial activity of the soil environment for years, it remains remarkably intact. The suberin acts as a biological shield, preventing fungi and bacteria from rapidly digesting the cellular walls. Because the cells are closed and elastic, cork does not shatter under pressure. When the soil expands due to water absorption or freezing, the pieces of cork compress slightly, acting as tiny cushions within the soil profile. When the soil dries and contracts, the cork expands back to its original shape. This constant micro-expansion and contraction actively maintains the macropores in the soil matrix. It resists compaction mechanically. Furthermore, because the cork pieces remain intact, they act as permanent thermal insulators within the soil profile. The trapped air inside the suberin cells does not easily conduct heat. When the summer sun bakes the surface of the soil, the cork chunks create micro-pockets of shade and temperature stability for the delicate root hairs and beneficial microbiology operating just beneath the surface. This thermal regulation is absent in soils amended with materials that break down quickly. When growing roots encounter a piece of chopped cork in the soil, they do not find an impenetrable rock. They find a resilient, slightly yielding surface. The roots easily navigate around the cork, utilizing the permanent air and water channels that the cork holds open. The cork acts as a structural pillar that refuses to be crushed by the surrounding soil mass. Published research on organic soil amendments demonstrates that suberin-rich materials like cork maintain their structural integrity for up to 3 times longer than standard woody biomass. The physics suggests that over 3 years in the soil, chopped cork continues providing active aeration and structural support, long after brittle alternatives have crushed into dust. Now, let us examine the structural reality of perlite. Perlite is manufactured by heating volcanic glass to extreme temperatures, often around 1600 degrees Fahrenheit, until the trapped moisture inside vaporizes and pops, much like popcorn. The resulting structure is highly irregular and covered in open, jagged pores. When water enters the soil profile, it clings to the surface area of these open pores. Perlite holds water primarily on its surface and within its shallow crevices via surface tension. This makes it excellent for rapid drainage in a short-term nursery setting where plants are grown in sterile, loose peat moss and then quickly sold. But in a long-term garden environment, those open pores become a severe liability. When soil compacts around perlite, the physical reality of expanded glass becomes apparent. It is fragile. Fine clay and silt particles wash into the open pores of the perlite during heavy rains, clogging them. As the soil goes through natural wetting and drying cycles, it expands and contracts, exerting tremendous pressure on the delicate glass bubbles. Without any elasticity to absorb the shock, the perlite structure fails. It cracks, it splinters, and ultimately, it turns into a fine, white powder. Once the perlite shatters, it loses all its aeration properties. It no longer holds open the vital macropores required for oxygen exchange. Within a year, a soil mixture that was once fluffy and heavily amended with perlite can become heavily compromised, reverting back to a dense, oxygen-starved state. When we look at water retention over time, the comparison becomes even more stark. Perlite drains quickly and gives up its superficial moisture rapidly to evaporation. If you chop a natural wine cork into quarter-inch pieces and mix it into the soil, you are creating localized moisture reservoirs that behave differently. While the intact cork cells repel water, the rough, cut edges of the chopped cork hold moisture via capillary action in the tiny grooves created by the cutting process. More importantly, the physical voids created by the rigid cork chunks prevent the surrounding soil from consolidating. In a dense soil, water struggles to penetrate. When it finally does, the soil tightens up as it dries, squeezing out the air. The chopped cork acts as a spacer. It forces the soil particles to remain separated. This means that when rain falls, the water has immediate pathways to infiltrate deep into the root zone. A soil matrix properly amended with durable, elastic cork chunks will maintain its structural voids over a 3-year period, long after brittle alternatives have crushed into dust. The physics suggests that, at the 3-year mark, a cork-amended soil retains the same open-pore structure it had on day 1, while perlite-amended soil has compacted back toward its original density, meaning the soil around the cork continues to move and hold water as it was designed to, while the perlite soil is once again fighting the same compaction problem the gardener started with. To truly grasp the difference between a static glass bubble and an elastic biological matrix, We must look at a cross-section of the soil after 3 years of seasons, rainfall, and root growth. Imagine splitting the soil in half to see what remains. On the left side of the cross-section, the soil was heavily amended with perlite 3 years ago. You look closely at the matrix. There are no white, airy rocks left holding the soil apart. Instead, you see a dense, consolidated block of soil. If you look very closely with a magnifying glass, you might see tiny, sharp fragments of white glass dust embedded uselessly in the clay. The macropores are gone. The perlite shattered under the weight of the soil and the pressure of root expansion. When water hits this side of the cross-section, it pools immediately on the surface and struggles to infiltrate. The moisture profile is shallow because the structural amendment has failed. On the right side of the cross-section, the soil was amended with chopped natural cork 3 years ago. The difference is immediate, stark, and highly visible. The soil is not a solid block. It is a loose, richly aggregated matrix. You can clearly see the pieces of cork, stained dark from the surrounding organic matter, but fully structurally intact. When you press on this soil, it yields slightly and then springs back. The cork pieces are actively maintaining the voids. Roots have navigated easily through the open channels, creating a dense, healthy webbing throughout the entire depth of the cross-section. Fungal hyphae are starkly visible, bridging the small gaps between the soil particles and the rough, cut edges of the cork chunks. When water hits this side of the cross-section, it does not pool. It flows rapidly through the open macropores created by the cork, soaking deeply into the profile. If you trace the moisture gradient, you can see that the water has moved quickly past the evaporation zone at the surface and settled into the deeper soil layers where it remains sheltered from the sun. The 3 years of durability and the vastly superior moisture management are proven right here in the visual evidence of the cross-section. Understanding the mechanical properties of materials is how you build soil that actually lasts. If you're ready to stop buying temporary fixes and start using physics to your advantage, subscribe to the channel. In the next video, we are looking at broken terracotta pots and how their curvature dictates the movement of subsurface water. The decision between these two materials comes down to understanding their mechanical limits and matching them to the correct soil type. Perlite is a short-term, static aerator. It is excellent for starting seeds in a controlled tray where it will not experience compressive weight, heavy rainfall, or physical disturbance. But in the dynamic, heavy environment of a garden bed, a large outdoor planter, or heavy clay soil, its brittleness guarantees its rapid failure. Natural cork is a long-term, dynamic structural element. Its closed-cell architecture and elasticity allow it to absorb the mechanical stresses of the soil environment without losing its shape or its function. This makes it exceptional for heavy, dense soils, like clay or compacted loam, that desperately need permanent physical spacers to prevent them from locking up. It is also highly effective in large container gardens that are subjected to intense wetting and drying cycles. When preparing your soil, the ideal mixing proportion for chopped natural cork is roughly 10 to 15% by volume. This provides enough structural pillars to keep the soil matrix open without displacing too much of the nutrient-dense organic matter and mineral soil that your plants require. If you are dealing with severely compacted clay that turns to concrete in the summer, you might be tempted to increase the proportion of cork beyond 15%. Resist that urge. While the cork provides excellent aeration, an excessive amount can make the soil too loose, failing to provide enough anchor weight for taller plants in high winds. The 10 to 15% ratio strikes the perfect balance, ensuring that the heavy soil is forced to remain open while still maintaining enough density to physically support the root mass of mature vegetables and shrubs. What happens if you use both together? If you mix perlite and chopped cork in the same bed, you will witness the timeline of failure firsthand. During the first season, both will provide excellent drainage. By the second year, the perlite will begin to fracture and turn to dust, leaving the cork pieces to carry the entire structural load of the soil matrix. Using them together wastes the perlite. Use only natural cork. Synthetic wine stoppers are plastic and won't break down, polluting your garden instead of helping it. By saving your natural wine corks, chopping them up, and incorporating them into your heavy soils, you're introducing a highly engineered biological material that outperforms expensive commercial amendments. You're replacing a brittle glass bubble with an elastic structural pillar that refuses to be crushed. You spend money on perlite expecting a permanent fix, only to be betrayed by its mechanical weakness. The natural cork, treated as trash, delivers 3 or more years of resilient structural integrity, keeping the soil open, keeping the water pathways clear, and keeping the root zone aerated, because of its closed-cell, suberin-rich cellular design. When you think about the soil amendments you have purchased in the past, have you noticed them disappearing over time? And which household item would you prefer to try using instead?